Welcome back to Legalese 123, where we are covering cases across America. Welcome back to Legalese 123. I'm your host, Missy K. I hope everybody is doing well on this Tuesday, December where are we? The 16th. Well, what are we going to talk about today? Well, we have the aftermath of Brian Walshe. So, I wanted to do a little bit of a deep dive on who Brian Walshe was and what sort of motivates somebody to do the terrible things that he has done. So, let's get into it. Before we begin, make sure that you like and subscribe for more content. I'm up to 69 subscribers on YouTube, and I would like to get to 100 before the end of December. So before we continue on, please like and subscribe and share with your friends. So I've been doing a little bit of research on Brian Walshe. As you may have seen, this is a deep dive that I've done before on him, but we're going to go ahead and go through it and add a little sprinkling of some other information that I found. So, Brian Walshe versus Massachusetts. As we know, the past week or so, we have been diving deep into Brian Walshe and the murder of Anawalshe. And I say murder because he has been convicted. So, Brian and Anna were married on December 21st, 2015 in Boston. It was love at first sight, they said. Although Anna was currently already engaged with somebody else, meaning she was married to somebody else. I don't know when that relationship ended, but she did have a relationship with somebody else when she met Brian. They had 3 sons, 6, 4, and 2. Remember, she was married at the time to a chef at a hotel. She later described her and Brian as love at first sight. So Brian might have that charismatic personality that people are attracted to, and that might be also a personality trait that some might say could be led to how he was able to manipulate and do the things that he did in his life. So they met, felt like it was destiny, fell in love, got married quickly, had 3 children. She was a Serbian American, and she started up in the real estate world. This is just a little bit of her background. Anna came from nothing, right? And so she worked her way up. In the end of the marriage between her and Brian, she was the breadwinner in the family. She had gotten a job at Tishman Speyer. She was making anywhere up to around $300,000, but she was working very long hours trying to support her family. She didn't know what Brian's fate was going to be in the art fraud case, and so she was trying to make enough money to support herself and her 3 boys. So she had transferred to Tishman Speyer, like I stated, and she was also amassing her own real estate. She was buying properties, fixing them up, selling them. I don't know if she was renting them as well, but she was aspiring to be a real estate mogul herself, and apparently she was very successful in that. At the end of December of 2022, they had sold another property. They were going to take that money and throw it into their next property in Baltimore. So, who is Brian Walshe? So, Brian Walshe is the son of a renowned Boston neurologist, Dr. Thomas Walshe, who had passed away in 2018. According to the documents, Brian was largely excluded from his father's will amidst allegation that he had swindled around nearly $1 million. But come to find out, he had done more. So we're going to go ahead and add this to our stage and talk about what was happening in his father's estate, etc. We're going to remove this. We're going to bring this up, and we're going to read this article to you. Sorry, I was trying to make it larger. So, by the end of 2018, accused murderer Brian Walshe's life began to unravel. His father had died in September, and in October, federal prosecutors accused him of foisting a pair of sham Andy Warhol paintings and on an unsuspecting art dealer, charges that land him in prison. But amid that, cannot read. Walsh managed in December to convince the Plymouth County Probate Court to name him personal representative of his late father's estate, despite the fact that his father had expressly disinherited. Thomas Walshe, a prominent neurologist, had been estranged from his son for many years and died unexpectedly while traveling to India that year. It is slated that he might have died of HIV, and it also might be reported that when Brian Walshe had Googled, "Can you get DNA off of a knife that has HIV?" It is speculated that that knife that he was hiding in the cupboard that might have had HIV on it might have been his father's. His father had left his mother, Diana Walshe, when Brian was young to pursue his lifestyle with his partner. And according to a copy of the will was later accepted by the court of Thomas Walshe, acknowledged that only one child, Brian Reza Walshe, with whom I am not in contact. If I do not herewith bequeath property in this will to Brian, my failure to do so is intentional. I hereby bequeath to Brian my best wishes, but for nothing else from my estate. Back in December of 2018, however, Brian had argued that his father left no will, convincing the court to appoint him personal representative to the estate, with the authority of him beginning to liquidate his father's assets. According to the documents filed in the probate case, however, the older man's friends and nephew later stepped in, accusing Walshe of secretly destroying his father's will for his own personal gain. They argued he drained his father's bank accounts and sold off his belongings, estimated a total more than $500,000, while also seeking to sell his father's home in Hull. Brian and Tom's estrangement had everything to do with money, the elder Walshe, a longtime friend, Fred Pascator, told the court in a signed document. Brian stole money from Tom and swindled him out of almost $1 million during his life. Hauntingly, Pescator went on to allege that Brian Walshe had a violent streak, describing him as angry and a psychopath. The case, which played out alongside Walsh's criminal art fraud, was one of several legal and financial entanglements Walshe faced in the years before he was accused of killing his wife Anna on January 1st, 2023. Walshe, who was 50 at the time, is now on trial in Norfolk Superior Court for Anna Walshe's murder, where prosecutors allege he cut up her body and dumped her remains. Walshe just denied the murder charge, though he's admitted moving the body and lying to police. Walsh's attorney in the probate case, Anthony Porcello, did not respond to requests for comments. By the time Walsh's father died in September 2018, the father and son had almost zero contact for more than a decade, according to accounts filed in the probate case. Nevertheless, as news of his father's death began to circulate, Walsh's alleged contact Jeffrey Orenstein, his father's longtime friend who had helped renovate the older man's house in Hull. Brian texted me and asked me if he had keys or access to the Hull house, as he needed some paperwork, Orenstein said in a signed statement submitted by the court. Orenstein added that when he entered the house to find the documents, get Walshe a set of keys, he noticed Thomas Walsh's will on the cabinet in the office. I reviewed the will and left it where it could be found. However, I took some pictures. I noticed a list of beneficiaries, but as Tom told me many times over the years, had expressly disinherited Brian. In addition to disinheriting his son, Orenstein continued, Thomas Walsh's will named his nephew Andrew Walshe as executor. I still felt bad, Orenstein continued, so when I texted Brian later that day to tell him that I had set a set of keys under the mat, I did not tell him about him being disinherited. According to the court documents, the rift between father and son stemmed from an alleged theft of nearly $1 million. This dispute arose after Brian Walshe acquired a tumble-down home in Lenox in the early 2000s. His father allegedly agreed to fund the renovations with the idea that his son would pay him back the original amount and keep any profits once the home sold. But instead of paying his father back, Walshe pocketed the money and disappeared, according to a longtime friend of the father. Tom said he had talked to Brian that day. He was going to the bank. That was the last time Tom heard from Brian in 10 years. Nevertheless, Walshe got himself named personal representative for his father's estate in December of 2018. According to the court documents, Walshe did not inform any of his father's other relatives of the death. Meanwhile, the elder Walshe's nephew, Andrew Walshe, told the probate court that he had become increasingly anxious that winter when his uncle didn't reply to numerous messages. Andrew Walshe did not respond to the Globe interview request. He told the court, however, that he eventually contacted his uncle's friends who told him Thomas Walshe had died. But then Pescatore was preparing to seek a restraining order to block Brian Walshe from his bid to sell his father's house in Hull. He told Andrew Walshe that his uncle had left him the naming him as the executor. Brian Walshe had control over the estate, but his cousin had already removed valuables from the house in Hull. Andrew Walshe, who said he agreed to serve as executor roughly 10 years earlier, asked the court in July 2019 to remove his cousin and appoint him personal representative of his uncle's estate. It is clear that Brian destroyed the last will and testament, which excluded him from any inheritance, which he gained access to the whole property. Separately, he added that Brian Walshe had contacted family members, many named as beneficiaries, about his uncle's death. Brian Walshe had estranged himself from the Walshe family members due to their knowledge of the theft that he had committed to his father. He had many members of the Walshe family been informed, questions would have been raised much earlier regarding the estate. To support his claim, the nephew submitted photos Ornstein had taken of the will, as signed statements from two of his uncle's friends who acted as witnesses to the will. Brian Walshe sought to fight off his cousin's claim, told the court that he and his father had reconciled in May of 2017, adding they were planning for the elder Walshe to move in with him and Anna as the older man's needs changed. It was the first time that we had spoken candidly since a family therapy session in 1996, Walshe wrote in a signed statement to the court. He suggested their schism stemmed from his father's alternative lifestyle following the divorce, and adding that after his father suffered a stroke in 2016, it would have been medically impossible for him to write the will by himself, much less sign it. The signature is a possible forgery. Thomas Walsh's longtime friend, Fred Pescatore, declined a Globe interview, saying everything was a pack of lies. Their estrangement had nothing to do with Tom's alternative lifestyle, but rather to do with Brian being a sociopath. He went on to describe a trip to Asia he had taken earlier with his father and son. I saw Brian attempt to smuggle out antiquities from China. Walshe was very angry and physically violent person. When Brian was confronted, he picked up a stanchion and literally attempted to kill 5 guards that had come and talked to him about his crime. The court ultimately accepted Ornstein's photos of the will and sided with Andrew Walshe, naming him personal representative of the estate. The nephew then spent months trying to compel Brian Walshe to provide a full accounting of how he administered the estate. Andrew Walshe alleged his cousin had drained the elder Walsh's bank accounts of at least $250,000 and sold his possessions, which pegged him at another $250,000. But months after failed attempts to get his cousin to account for the estate, Andrew Walshe abandoned the effort in 2023. It was clear, he said, that Brian Walshe would never render an account. So, where does that leave us? Well, as I stated, who is Brian Walshe, right? And that goes into sort of the psyche behind who Brian Walshe was. Brian Walshe had a lavish lifestyle, right? He wanted to provide special things to Anna Walsh. I do believe that there was one thing that they said about a $100,000 plus ring. Could that be the ring that she is wearing on her finger in this picture that she took? Is this the Gucci necklace that part of it was found in with the bloody rug and fatty tissue that they found in the dumpster? One only knows. But there has been reports of Brian Walshe having a lavish lifestyle in which he was putting on the airs that he was a rich person, hosting lavish dinners where he would have a chef tasting menu and invite lots of people, and the bill at the end would be $10,000 or more. And I believe that there was an account of one time that he didn't pay the bill, had to leave his watch for a resting place, and then later the next day came back to the hotel to retrieve his watch and pay in cash. The art fraud case. Well, this is interesting as well. So let's bring up another article that was written about that. We're going to remove this. We're going to add this. And we're going to make this bigger. All right. So Brian Walshe sentenced for scheme to sell counterfeit Warhol paintings. A Lin was sentenced today in connection with a years-long, multifaceted art fraud scheme involving two purported Andy Warhol paintings. Brian Walshe, who was 49, was sentenced in U.S. District Court Judge William Young to 37 months in prison and 3 years of supervised release. Walshe was ordered to pay restitution of $475,000. Walshe pleaded guilty to one count of wire fraud, interstate transportation for a scheme to defraud, and unlawful monetary transaction. In November of 2016, a buyer found two Andy Warhol paintings on sale on eBay. The eBay account apparently belonged to Anna Walshe, and when they were arrested or when they were talked to, they both had to give a DNA sample to the feds. And that is how the DNA was used in identifying Anna in Brian Walsh's murder trial. In early 2016, a buyer found two Andy Warhol paintings for sale on eBay. The paintings were of two Warhol's Shadows, a series of untitled abstract canvas paintings from 1978. The original listing of the paintings was $100,000. In the advertisement, Walshe, the eBay seller, included a picture of an invoice for the two Warhol shadow paintings with Warhol Foundation numbers and a purchase price of $240,000. The buyer believed the paintings were authentic and in between November 3rd and November 5th, 2016, arranged with Walshe to purchase the artwork outside of eBay for $80,000. Walshe and the buyer signed a contract which specified that the buyer had 3 days to terminate the contract and get a full refund if the buyer did not accept the artwork. On November 7th, the buyer's assistant flew to Boston to retrieve the paintings, providing Walshe with a cashier's check of $80,000. The cashier's check was deposited that day into an account that Walshe controlled, and $33,400 was subsequently withdrawn within the 14 days. On November 8th, 2016, the buyer removed the painting frames and found no Warhol Foundation authentic stamps and noticed the canvases and staples looked new. When he compared the paintings to the photographs from the eBay listing, they did not look identical. The buyer concluded that the paintings he purchased from Walshe were not authentic. The buyer then repeatedly attempted to contact Walshe, who initially did not respond, and then made excuses for the delay in refunding the buyer's money. Walshe initially gained access to the paintings through a victim who was his friend. While the victim in South Korea, Walshe told the victim that he could sell some of the art for a good price. The victim agreed and let Walshe take the two shadow paintings and other fine art pieces. Subsequent investigation revealed that Walsh sold the original shadow paintings to a gallery in 2011. The paintings passed through multiple hands until they were sold to buyers outside the country. To date, the government has not regained possession of the original shadow paintings. Additionally, the investigation also revealed that sometime in 2011, Walsh obtained a different set of replica shadow paintings from an artist who did not know Walsh's purpose. In 2015, Walsh sold that to another victim who resided in France. Acting United States Attorney Josh Levy and Jody Cohen, special agent in charge of the Federal Bureau of Investigation, the FBI, Boston Division, made the announcement today. The Lynn Police Department provided assistance with the investigation. So that goes to show you sort of the beginnings of the downfall of Brian Walshe, and that a person could potentially start a wayward path down the road of deception, right? So, what happened to Anna? Anna was last seen on January 1st, 2023. Her husband initially told police that she had left for work and that he hadn't seen her. And then he didn't call the police until January 4th. On the 1st of January, here he is at Lowe's buying cleaning supplies, etc. Then, after he had Googled how to dismember a body, he went back to Home Depot to buy the tools and supplies needed to do that. The same investigators that were in the Karen Reed case were also in his case. Buchnick, Keefe, Gorino, Proctor, Tully, Fanning. Remember that Fanning went to Brian Walshe's house to retrieve the phones, but then he saw the iPad. Brian said, "Sure, go ahead and I'll give you the iPad." And he did not know that the iPad had synced up to his MacBook because they had the same Apple ID, and that is how they found all the Google searches. And then Connor, Keefe, and Garino downloaded his phone, got the location data, then began investigating where did Brian go, etc., to see if they could locate Anna. Motive, potentially an affair, life insurance. Anna might have divorced him after he had been sentenced in his art fraud case. She wanted to take the kids to DC with her because that is where she'd started her new lifestyle. Were the warrants unlawful? Well, that is going to be a question upon appeal. Larry Tipton made some arguments as to why those searches and stuff shouldn't come in, and they were fruit of the poisonous tree. Is the judge's ruling appealable? Just remember Brian Walshe, although he's been convicted and will be sentenced tomorrow, perhaps, every case will go up on appeal, and these Google searches will definitely come up in his appeals case. And will he get a new trial from that? Well, appeals take a very long time, so it's a wait and see situation. But we'll be covering that as we go along. So Brian Walshe was convicted of first-degree murder yesterday, December the 15th. There is a sentencing hearing tomorrow at 9 a.m. We're not only going to hear the sentencing in this, even though first-degree murder comes with an automatic life sentence. He is also going to be sentenced on his lying to the police, as well as his improper disposal of a body. We don't know what Judge Frenier is going to do. She wanted to definitely see the impact statements that are going to come in. So she was encouraging the prosecution to get everything together so that she could hopefully wrap everything up tomorrow. If those impact statements and everything isn't concluded, she may not go ahead and rule on that. So that is a to be determined. Now, there is another situation going on where Brian Walshe's mother is being sued for the property in Cohasset where Brian Walshe was renting the home, and she is being sued by the landlord in that case. So let's see if we can read it. So Mr. Oh, we're gonna probably Mr. Peter, he probably pronounced his name when he testified, but I'm not going to pronounce it because I think that I'm going to butcher it. Capozzoli, Capozzoli. I think that's what it is. So, um, it is against her insurance company and it also is against her, the defendant Diana Walsh. So let's get into it. So they rented the house on 516 Chief Justice Cushing Highway in Cohasset in Norfolk County, Massachusetts. On March 9th, 2022, they entered into a lease. We're trying to get through the legal stuff. Okay, during the course of her and her family's occupancy of the property, uh, the family damaged, defaced, misused, and abused the property in numerous ways and used the premises for improper and unlawful purposes, causing substantial damages to the property, which would be very costly to repair. The damages include, without limitation, are described in the following paragraphs. The defendant Walsh and her family repeatedly placed their large German Shepherd dog in the rear, fenced-in area of the property for unreasonably long periods of time and left the animal there unsupervised and uncontrolled. As a result, the dog incessantly scratched the doors, the shingle siding, the window screens, and the fencing, causing substantial damage to the exterior of the house, the doors, and the fence. The dog was also permitted to dig up the landscaping in the backyard, leaving large areas bare of any grass. The defendant Walsh and her family punched numerous holes in the walls and ceilings of the home without repair. In one instance, defendant Walsh's son Brian entered the attic, punched his foot through the ceiling of his and his wife's bedroom, leaving a large hole more than a foot in diameter. Defendant Walsh and her family abused and misused the in-ground swimming pool of the property. Among other things, defendant Walsh and or her family member took rocks from the landscape rock wall in the backyard and threw them into the pool, damaging both the surface of the pool and the rock wall. Because of this neglect and abuse, the in-ground pool has suffered substantial damage. Fourth, on January 1st, 2023, upon information and belief, defendant Walsh's son murdered and dismembered his wife Anna in the property. This caused blood and other human remains to contaminate the home, including the Walsh's bedroom, where the murder apparently took place. We don't know that for sure. And the basement, where apparently the dismemberment and disposal took place. This contamination of the property required the plaintiff to hire a company that specialized in decontamination of murder and other crime scenes, a substantial expense. This decontamination process involved the interior alley, the full cleaning, treatment, and painting of the basement, and the removal of the bedroom wood flooring. Remember that the police took apart the flooring in the bedroom, so therefore it needs to be replaced, right? And treatment of the underlying support structure. This decontamination process also involved thorough cleaning and decontamination of the bathrooms and other areas. Fifth, when the police learned of this murder, they conducted a full forensic examination and testing the property, which caused substantial damage, including without limitations the following. The police took apart the wood flooring in the Walsh's bedroom. The police sprayed a purple blood detecting liquid called luminol over numerous locations in the home, including most of the bathrooms, leaving stains on the walls, mattresses, furnitures, and bathroom facilities like toilets, sinks, and showers. The police entered the attic and disturbed much of the insulation while looking for evidence, and the police dismantled, tested, and examined the filter for the in-ground pool, necessitating its replacement. Most of all of these damages were pointed out in the defendant Walsh during her inspections of the property on January and February 2023. Nevertheless, defendant Walsh failed and refused to repair and remedy these items of substantial damage prior to surrendering possession of the property. In addition to these tangible damages, the property, because of the widely publicized murder committed on the property by Walsh's son, the property has now been psychologically impacted, which has substantially decreased the potential rental and sales value. So, what is going on in this case? Well, unfortunately, Diana Walsh has not commented and or has not done anything in reference to uh, taking responsibility for these damages. She is the signer on the lease. She leased it, and Brian and his family were living there. So she has defaulted essentially. Um, I'm trying to look for this document that I had that stated a little bit more information about the case. Oh, I can't seem to find it. Let me see if I can Google it really quickly. So she basically said, no way, no schmay. Those are legal terms, right? That is not it. All right. Anyways, I can't find what I'm looking for, but it's okay. So, Brian Walsh's mother has not responded to the lawsuit. The insurance companies are trying to figure out what they're going to do. So there's a default judgment against mom. There is a hearing in February regarding this, and I will bring you the latest updates. How much money do they need to pay regarding this case? So, where are we in the land of Brian Walshe? I wanted to give you a little bit of background as to who Brian Walshe was, because what type of person potentially unalives their wife and has the audacity to go ahead and dismember her and then throw her in the trash? Well, these things just don't creep up on you and then all of a sudden you do them. So Brian Walshe has had a propensity for potential violence. He's had a he has been known to be a liar in his art fraud schemes. He has been known to sort of put on the airs that he is this person who has a lot of money and has defrauded his father. His mother has been paying for a lot of things in his life. At the end, we knew that Jim Mutlu had stated that Brian currently didn't have a job. So is he this sort of vagabond who has been living off of his mother and his father and swindling people left and right? It is also purported that he has swindled money from friends. So he has put on this airs that he was this rich and wealthy person who had this lavish lifestyle. And in the end, when he was on house arrest and he didn't have anything, did that come crumbling down? And that might be how he and Anna started this lavish lifestyle that, hey, look, I have this money, you come live with me, etc. We'll build this wonderful life together. And in the end, she potentially saw him for what he was, which was he had no money and he basically was siphoning off of people. Was he siphoning off of her? Who knows? But in the end, the justice has prevailed, and Brian is convicted of first-degree murder. That comes with a life sentence. So he's going to be spending life in jail for that, plus also his art crimes. He was going to spend 3 years in that, plus whatever he's going to get for lying to the police and the improperly disposing of her body. So this is pretty much the conclusion to the Brian Walshe case. We'll cover the hearing tomorrow about what he's going to get, etc. But I wanted to give you a little bit of background as to who Brian Walshe really, truly was. And hopefully, Anna Walshe, may she rest in peace, and that her family and friends get the justice that they deserve, because nobody deserves to be unalived in that way and to be thrown out the way that she did. So, sadly, this is where I leave you. This is where we end this stream. So please make sure you like and subscribe for more content. More shall be coming in the next days. Thanks for watching. We'll see you again. Thanks for watching Legalese 123. If you like what you saw, please like and subscribe for more content.